Swami Vivekananda, I would always say, is the best antidote for all our self-deprecating, low self-confidence, instilled secular education that instilled reality is always more dominant. And the challenges that prevail are the ones that shape up our thoughts. Even if we are very futuristic, we have to first reconcile
with the present.
I might prefer to take this aspect of Shri Aurobindo's nationalism, that aspect of his understanding of Sanatana Dharma, and fit it into template of Hindutva, and do all of those things because of my own current interests. But it would be never complete representation of him.
Too many people are aware.
Yeah, so this is this
grand convergence.
This is absolutely a phenomenal part.
This is as important a movement as Swami Vivekananda and Ramakrishna. That guru.
Shri Aurobindo goes forward to say that this is almost like we belong to that lineage.
Namaste. Welcome to both. Our conversation on civilizational matters, understanding the civilizational trajectory, the contemporary landscape of the discourse, the vocabulary of that discourse, and also, most importantly, the ideas, the guidance, and the spiritual wisdom that we get from the most seminal thinkers over the last 200 years. And what do we learn and what do we glean from their insights for contemporary discourse? As you're aware, we've been trying to track the Indian history and Indian cultural evolution in the last 200 years. And we've also looked at the composition of the current Hindutva discourse. What are the different arguments within that? What is the moral logic for each of those arguments? And what informs the values of people who are representing that argumentation? Part of this exercise, we also mentioned that this is not so much about just understanding. This is also future forming. This is a program for us to really evolve our own ways of self-authoring, to actually look at the ideas from the most important thinkers that Bharat has produced, but also internalize that as habits of mind and habits of being for ourselves. It is in this context that we've been also tracking the works of the most important gurus that we need to learn from. We looked at the Swami Vivekananda school of Hindu nationalism. Also looked at Shri Ramswarup and Shri Sitaram Goyalji as part of the Voice of India tradition. And today it is our honor to welcome Shri Ramchandra ji to talk to us about tremendous civilizational impact of Shri Aurobindo and what Shri Aurobindo means to all of us, not just as nationalists or not just as part of Hindutva discourse, but fundamentally as human evolution itself. And how do we even understand the magnificence and the magnitude of that work? But before we get into Shri Aurobindo's work and trying to even attempt learning from that, it's an honor to introduce Shri Ramchandra ji to our audience. Most of us are publicly associated with Brihat, and in some ways people know us and people look at our work in a public forum. But the force that has been guiding Brihat ever since, in fact, even before the idea of Brihat was born, was Ramchandra ji. Not just for the team and the organization as a whole, but at a very personal level. It is my visit to Sanatan Siddha Ashram and spending the time that I did with Ramchandra ji that actually consolidated and concretized the Sankalpa. Because I was happy to not do anything, but as the powers that are said that there should be something coming out of the churn. So thank you so much for your time, Ramchandra sir, and it's an honor and very emotional moment for me to welcome you to the Brihat studio and talk to us. Of course, we will learn from you about Shri Aurobindo's life and works and what that greatness means to us. But before that, if you could just talk to us a little bit about your association with Shri Aurobindo and your own journey.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha, Shri Mahaganapatiye Namaha, Shri Matre Namaha, Shri Meeraravindaya Namaha. So that's the mantra of invoking the presence of Mother and Shri Aurobindo. They are together all the time. And that is exactly how it needs to be seen. And it's very pertinent,
Mm.
for us to see them together.
Mm.
And thank you and Bruhat's team for calling me here. And finally, we are making this happen.
Yeah.
And after several attempts on this, you have been kind in putting me on a pedestal as a source of inspiration, etc., etc. And it is so easy to be source of inspiration to you and the team at Bruhat, because you are always inspired. So I don't have to do anything much in terms of adding, further fuel to it. I really love the whole idea. When we first discussed and when I also wrote this essay on Bhavani Bharati and reflecting about Shri Aurobindo's contribution in this regard. The phrase that you and Pankaj came up with was Firekeepers of Civilization.
Yeah.
And that was a very inspirational, that kind of set forth what we are really looking at. And that's how I think, in my humble view, we should be looking at really the giants, not just thinkers, but the spiritual giants. And because India, the Bharata as a land, we cannot just have thinkers per se. Unless there is an anchoring into spirituality and adhyatma, the pertinence and relevance is never complete. So from that point of view, that phrase really charged me up, and to take that up. And then when you say that you were happy to do nothing, this is something that I have been clear in my head for a long time, that where we are currently as a society, as a civilization, as a culture, as a group of sampradayas and traditions and the rich diversity in the thought, currently where we are, we cannot afford to not do nothing, or
this is deja vu.
So, there is no way out. Everybody, I think, in my humble view, should do something in their own zone of influence. And we have to continue to do something in bringing thoughts and people together. And at the same time, realize we are not the doers. We are being moved, animated, and somehow be present and inspired by the force that moves us. And be always in a posture of this, Anjali Mudra to that force. I think this we have to ask every single day when we get up and see the sunrise, that let us be in this posture, seeking greater opportunities to serve dharma in whatever limited ways we understand what dharma is, and then move forward from there. So, and so I think you asked me about my association with Shri Aurobindo. So,
because I know it's a long one.
So, I would say, given I was not ever connected with, Shri Aurobindo's, so to say, the ecosystem of Pondicherry
or the
structures, where we come from. I come primarily from Satya Sai Baba's food. That is, he is my Param Guru. And currently I am serving a beautiful ancient yogic bhakti tradition of Baul tradition from Bengal. It is being led by Srimati Parvati Bhavan. And so I have an opportunity to be her collaborator and work with her in conceptualizing and bringing this and manifesting this work. So that's kind of my core associations and where I locate myself. Coming to Shri Aurobindo, it just so happened that, I think I encountered him in a relatively, I would say, an early stage of, and otherwise a young adult where, the chances of encountering Shri Aurobindo is far less in generally. So I think I was probably 19 or 20 or 21 or something like that, just around my graduation days. I was going to Bangalore, away from Hyderabad, to pursue my postgraduate studies. Right from my childhood, I was always inclined towards spirituality, and Swami Vivekananda and Shri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa have been the primary sources of inspiration. And then Sri Satya Sai Baba and his grace and his blessings have given me an impetus to do service. That was his main motive. So because of those influences, I wanted to carry something of spiritual value when I'm going away from home for the first time after my graduation. And very valiantly, I picked up a book or essays on Gita. And I read through, it was authored by Shri Aurobindo. I had a vague estimation of connection of Bande Mataram slogan with him. Beyond that, I did not know much about it. But when I picked it up and I put it back, but something made me pick it up again, and I, turned the first open cover of the book. I saw my father's handwriting, where he writes so beautifully. He wrote something of Swami Vivekananda's quote. I don't, remember exactly, but he wrote something on the lines of, in order to understand the essence of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, one has to have blood coursing through the steely nerves or steely veins, or something.
Swami
Vivekananda.
That's an electric charge.
So, and as you know, Swami Vivekananda, I would always say, is the best antidote for all our self-deprecating, low self-confidence, instilled secular education that instills in us. He is the best antidote, to build that, self-esteem and confidence and respect. And so that immediately, as soon as I read that, I was like, oh, I need to take this. And then as things would happen, when I picked up the book and I started reading it, during my postgraduate days, I could not move, obviously, ahead because Shri Aurobindo's language is pretty dense, I would say, at that point in time. And especially for a 21-year-old, it's too much to ask for. But my curiosity, I did not give up. And I did something far more sillier. Though I did not understand anything, I started counting the number of words he used in a long sentence between two full stops. So that would be like, ranging from 45 to 50 words. I said, okay, this is a really long sentence. I kept doing this, and then one fine day when I came back home from a semester break and I continued to read it, something started entering. I felt as though he opened the door from the other side. And then I started getting a grip of it. And I think this is what I would advise to any youngsters or anyone who takes up Shri Aurobindo. Essays on Gita is a great start because he still does not bring in his entire perspective of integral yoga, Purna yoga, new vocabulary into that book so heavily. And yet he is commenting upon something like Srimad Bhagavad Gita, which is already inherent and part of our system, so much. And this, by the way, is not a translation. This is essays and his reflections. So you are not going like phrase by phrase. He is giving an essence and a gist over chapter by. I think he has written it as part of his Arya. He used to write the journal and has published it as part of it. I would tell people, be patient and be obstinate and be adamant and be stubborn and not, giving up.
Be at it.
Be at it. And then what happens is he opens to a whole world of vocabulary, ideas, and everything. And so that's how
that's how the door opened. So, it's very difficult to even summarize the influence and the range of Shri Aurobindo. Everything from spiritual dimension to the political dimension to the idea of Bharat and how we should all think about Bharat. I think there are just so many dimensions. It would be great if you can help us locate the centrality of his work and how should we approach Shri Aurobindo before we get intimate with his works or the ideas. What did he represent? The times that he was in, what he was writing about, what do they mean for us, and how should we understand or approach Shri Aurobindo even before we get into his texts and his thoughts?
There are two ways to approach, in my view. One is always to understand and locate what were his times. What was prevalent during that time. Because I am a very firm believer that no matter how great a personality is, they are influenced and they are reciprocating to the times around. That is
the law of nature, perhaps.
Absolutely. That is, the Prakriti is always more dominant. And the challenges that prevail are the ones that shape up our thoughts even if we are very futuristic, we have to first reconcile
with the present,
and what prevails. So it's good first to understand
the times that
the times that he was in and what he was writing, during those times. The other way of looking at it is in your introductory statement, you said, Hindutva, nationalism, political revolution, etc., etc. But still, Shri Aurobindo is way more than all that. This is an extremely important principle that we should never forget, especially in Shri Aurobindo's case, because he was essentially a yogic seer. That is the ultimate truth of it. Now, as a devotee and somebody who really am completely devoted to him, I might have my own definitions of avatar code. He's an incarnation. All that is fine. But I don't want to thrust that on you or anybody else, who does not subscribe to the beliefs and the faith systems that I have. But what is indisputable is the aspect that he is a yogic seer, and his vision, and he was a drashta, and his vision was vast, deep, high, in all the dimensions covering that. And from there emerged the aspect of Purna Yoga and the integral yoga. So at some point in time, I might prefer to take this aspect of Shri Aurobindo's nationalism, that aspect of his understanding of Sanatana Dharma, and fit it into template of Hindutva, and do all of those things because of my own current interests. But it would be never complete representation of him. And that is totally okay. That's how it is when we walk into the territory of these great masters. We are essentially going to the banks of a vast river which is flowing. And we will only pick up as much water that our capacity allows us to do. So from that point of view, I think first this has to be done. Because otherwise what happens is we end up talking about certain aspects with such fervor and certitude that people who are very well versed with his integral yoga and Purna yoga, they might not really find it appropriate representation of him. So I think these are the first. And
the times that he was, what was he responding to?
Absolutely. I think there are two things at that juncture, especially from the Sanatana Dharma point of view and the Hindu Dharma's point of view. I might be using it interchangeably. Hindu Dharma, Sanatana is all.
He is himself mentioned that.
So Sanatana
Indian nationalism is Sanatana Dharma.
Absolutely. So he said, and the fantastic statement he made is, only politics of India is Sanatana Dharma. That is the principle. And I think no other giant has made such a prolific statement. And he made it absolutely clear. So I think this is an extremely important aspect. And when he was saying that, he was doing two important works from a critiquing point of view of the prevalent forces during that time.
The
dominant forces. One was colonial, imperial forces, especially of the British favor. And next is so-called scientific temperament that was emerging. And obsession of empiricism and scientific views, rationality being thrusted onto the domains such as philosophy, religion, yoga, occult sciences. These are the two spaces where he first makes phenomenal points for discussion in showing how incomplete Europe's understanding of Bharatiya culture is. Two, he does a very good Purva Paksha of their own worldview. And even theological worldview as well as so-called cultural worldview that is emerging post Renaissance, etc. And he even mentions that what is Renaissance in Indian context? Does India need Renaissance? And what does it mean in that case? So he has done enormous amount of work on this. He has written a lot on this. And one can find about this predominantly in Indian culture, his work, Indian culture, foundations of Indian culture, art. And then there is a brilliant book called Human Unity, War and Self-Determination. And it's a very interesting book, and where he even talks about the necessity of war, how it emerges. And before people plunge to call him, oh, is he a warmonger? No, please read what he is talking. What is the inevitability of such circumstances in the collective evolution. So this is one part of it. Another part is we need to go through his foundational inspirations on Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Vedanta, Upanishads. These are most important influences as philosophical systems for him, for his own yoga. And then understand Purna Yoga or integral yoga from that perspective.
So in a way, he was at the intersection of the grand forces of history, which was the dominant force at that time, but also culture, spirituality, nationalism. So he was right at the center of all of these discourses, and also the grand sort of domination of the scientific worldview. We talk a lot about the colonial influence, but I don't think enough has been explored about the response to a scientific paradigm. So maybe if you could just talk to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so he has definitely paid a very close attention to Bose's experiments, on understanding animation in the plants, that there is life in plants, and he made very cogent observations on each of these matters. He has commented upon very important scientific developments, including evolution from the Darwinian point of view. And I think that is something we should touch upon in this conversation at an appropriate time. And so he, at that point in time, he was somebody who made it adequately clear that science is exploration in the material domain. And therefore, its observation from an empirical point of view
and the laws
and everything, pretty much they are also, see, the reality is so tricky,
subtle,
I would say, and it is so, I would say, more than tricky, it is so elusive that it can make you as a seeker, give you an impression that you have somehow caught the secret of it by understanding few laws. But more it reveals, all the more it conceals. So this is an extremely important understanding, which our own spiritual, our own Adhyatmic thought process gives us.
I think physics is also coming around to accepting that.
So I think the current developments are there, and therefore I think quantum physics, etc., and whatever, and also the debates and the conversations around the neuroscience and the consciousness and all of that are talking about it. But honestly, in my assessment, they still locate themselves inevitably on the material basis.
Material plane.
So consciousness is
elusive
for them. It is perhaps they cannot conceptualize consciousness without brain coming into the picture. So that's the thing. For us, we have a very seamless view of God.
So mediating with tradition at the same time, sir, while he was doing this?
So he was... this question, if you allow me, then we can even phrase that what are his takes on tradition.
Yes.
Right? So that way, I think he was a very... people tend to, because he has come up with Purna Yoga and the way he has structured it and the way he has postulated it and he gave his hypothesis, there is a tendency for traditionalists to think that he is not a traditionalist and he is an anti-tradition, so to say. I would say neither he was anti-tradition nor he was pro-tradition. He was pro his goal, basically. And he had a certain Adesha, which he was pursuing and following. But he located every single bit of his philosophy, metaphysics, yoga, on the grounds of work done so far.
Which is
traditions.
Yes.
All the traditions. And he spends enormous amount of time in delineating this. So my statement about traditions and association of traditions is that he especially, when you open a very seminal book of his, Synthesis of Yoga. In Synthesis of Yoga, he starts a chapter called 4 Aids of Yoga.
4 Aids of Yoga.
Yeah, the tools are the aids of yoga. Right up front, first thing he mentions is having knowledge about the principles and the systems and the thought process that has already gone into the practice. And then he says, this is Shastra. And then he says, in order to practice that knowledge and put it into action, you need to have Utsaha. Right? And then he brings in a dimension that the Utsaha and Shastric knowledge can translate into your spiritual experience by the touch of a guru.
So he's also paying
So
attention
Guru
to the
Sishya Parampara also he is acknowledging it and he's bringing that into the play. And then he says something very beautiful. He says, but the fruition of your effort for yogic knowledge and self-perfection will only happen when the time permits it to happen. Kala. So when the time is ripe, when the moment is right, the spiritual destiny shall be attained by the seeker. So this, I think, should make it categorically clear that how beautifully and profoundly he located himself within the milieu of the traditional knowledge system. Right. So I think
that's the one. So on one hand, he was dealing and responding to the emergence of the empirical paradigm. At the same time, he was also engaging with tradition at a first principles level, while he was pursuing his own Adesha.
Absolutely.
So this idea of Adesha, it's a very quintessential Indian idea. It's a Hindu idea. What was the movement? And there's also the conversation that he supposedly had with Swami Vivekananda. So if you could talk to us a little bit about what constitutes Adesha and how does one receive it? How does one pursue it?
What constitutes Adesha? I cannot comment much about it. Shri Aurobindo's case, we can reflect together what has happened. And I would also say that at this point in time, I should, we both should bring a disclaimer to the audience saying that since we will be discussing really big ideas. And
we are not.
We are nowhere, the experiencers of that in a way. We have our own limited experience and praxis
in different gradients. That also has to have to be
in different gradients. And also, more importantly, we are reflecting about what were the thought processes and the line of thinking and the ideas developing Shri Aurobindo.
Which is we are imputing something onto ourselves that we are.
So I think this is
with all humility, of course.
So it is something, but we will continue to discuss because these are so exciting and so energetic. We have to do this. This is what is part of our, swadhyaya. In a way, sitting together, discussing and recollecting and enthusing ourselves. So on the front of Adesha, as it's very popularly known, he was a revolutionary freedom fighter. His aspirations and his goals were very clearly for freedom,
political.
But at this point in time, I would like to bring in an interesting observation related to astrology. Okay, when you look at his chart, the strongest planet and superlatively strong planet is Sun. Okay. So what happens in the Sun, and anybody who knows the basics of Jyotisha, Sun is the center of the solar system. And even when you go to a temple, all the grahas are there, and the Sun is located in the center. So the centrality and always the limelight is on the Sun. So no matter where you are, you are likely to have that fame the limelight is always on the individual in a way. What this gives to the individual, there are many ifs and buts and terms and conditions and all of that. But when there is such a strong Sun, what happens is there is a tendency of a phenomenal Himalayan levels of self-confidence that is possible to come. And in my own experience, I have seen all breed of atheists. Okay. And there is atheism that surges from so-called, the depression, something has lost, and why did God do this to me, etc., etc. And this is widely believed. That is understandable. Then there is, I would say, meek atheism of empiricism, rationality that comes in. Oh, this is not measurable. What you are just talking is all, non-existent. It's delusional. So whole spirituality, please throw it into the ocean. That is another brand of atheism.
There is also the liberal atheism, which makes freedom and reason as gods. That I'm able to intuit and I'm able to reason.
Yes. So that is another form of atheism. But there is another interesting form of atheism, which I really look at it with some sense of acknowledgement, I would say, because the self-confidence is so high that it is genuinely psychologically, they do not feel the need of a higher force to intervene and guide their lives. Shri Aurobindo more or less belonged to that.
It was.
In a way. I know he never said he was an atheist or probably it was not adequate, he said, but he openly acknowledged that his inclination towards spiritual practices and yogic approaches and all of that was absolutely minimal given his education in UK.
In UK, yes.
And one of his most profound experiences was when he was finally returning to India. His father thought that, his ship, drowned. And so that led to his death, in fact. And by the time Shri Aurobindo finally came and he touched the soil of India, he had a vibration running through his body, and which was very spiritual in nature. And he could understand this is a transmission of some nature altogether, as if suddenly his life's compass and destiny has shifted, turning. So he was fervently, evaluating and contemplating on the nationalistic movements, etc. He was deeply studying them, even when he was in UK. In that context, you would say that, he was not interested in seeking out to the higher power, for anything else.
He was here and now.
In a way. So he was kind of, self-contented with his, abilities. And he was voracious reader. His sister would remark in one of his her observations that even if you would make annual visits to home, he would probably get a pair of clothes or something, but he would carry a huge trunk of books all the time with him. So he was that sort of a voracious reader. In this context, he was really possessed and obsessed by nationalism and freedom of India. So if at all spirituality was to play any role, it was to the end of freedom. That was very much clear for him. And he was seeking spiritual solutions. Can they help me? And in the process, he has come across a couple of yogic experiences which have healed his brother who was not well. And he said, can I put such powers to use? And then another visit to a hilly area, I think in Gujarat, in Chandan and I think, I don't know which location is that, where he is in the presence of a Kali temple and Ma Kali's presence. He is not prepared to this movement. Suddenly, everything around him collapsed, and the spatial sense collapsed, and he felt a living experience of the deity, of the goddess Ma Kali. This was such a phenomenal impact. He had no second thought about the higher power, and he translated this as Bhavani Bharati, as the destiny holder of the Bharatas. And he brought back that fervor, into he brought back that spiritual fervor into his freedom struggle and his design of freedom struggle and the coaching and the counseling he was doing to the youngsters back in Bengal. And he even used to write his pen name as Kali, when he used to sign off the letters and then send it across. So this is his spiritual context in his, I think I don't know if I have addressed your question on trying to understand.
No, but clearly it shows the curation of that towards the Adesha and his
so Adesha, so the Adesha part essentially is that after this being a revolutionary, he even designed a Alipur bomb case where he wanted to assassinate a couple of important British officers. That failed. And at this point in time, it is important to note that he sometimes made a very pertinent observation, saying that he was so upset with the impatience of the revolutionaries.
He was a patient revolutionary.
He said that what we are trying to achieve is of a higher order goal. And this impulsiveness, restlessness towards this is actually a counterproductive force. So this is a very yogic observation.
It is.
And it is so pertinent even in now our current discourse.
It's so critical.
And when we make our cultural statements, when we make if we are of the habit of indulging in weak speech, and then it is more counterproductive. So there has to be a yogic restraint. That is what he was indicating to the youngsters there. And when he was imprisoned in New Alipur jail, he had a phenomenal experience. He was very despondent. It was a solitary confinement. He would hardly get to see the sun. And food used to be thrown inside a bit, and he had to use it for the toilet and in the same space. And of course, all sorts of difficult movements at that point in time. And occasionally when depression was dawning on him, just imagine somebody whose son is so strong and so self-confident, depression entering them. So that is a level of challenge. It was breaking him down. At that point in time, he had his own visionary experiences with Swami Vivekananda coming, visiting him and guiding him in yoga. and especially opening up higher mind realms of intuition and insight. And these are the realms which Swami Vivekananda literally showed him and gave him access to. And this is the transmission that has happened.
This, not too many people are aware.
Yeah, so this is this
Grand convergence.
This is absolutely a phenomenal part.
This is as important a movement as Swami Vivekananda and Ramakrishna.
Yeah,
That guru.
Shri Aurobindo goes forward to say that this is almost like we belong to that lineage, in a way.
Yeah.
But an important observation comes here.
Yeah.
As soon as that is said, that when his followers later on asked during the Pondicherry times that are you going to establish a monastic order and what, he said no. That is not our approach. So that we will come to a part. So here at this point in time when all doors were closed, no way he was going to win this battle in the court, in the trial, because all evidence was mounted against him. I think Shri Chittaranjan Das was his lawyer. He was doing brilliant job at the same time. But Shri Aurobindo being Shri Aurobindo, he is more intelligent than his counsel. So he used to think that he knows more how to present it. But at some point in time, he has a clear Adesha. Adesha happens, the description is that in the moment of despendence, he sees the jail sentry and the prisoner out there as Sri Krishna or Vasudeva. And when he is going all the way to the court for the trial, on his way he's seeing all the prisoners as Vasudeva, all the sentries and all the policemen as Vasudeva, and Vasudeva Sri Krishna. And then when he is in the courtroom, everybody listening to the whole trial, he is Vasudeva. The judge is Vasudeva and the council is Vasudeva. Everybody. This was a Upanishadic, revelation of an order of that stature. And in this moment, he only gets one Adesha. He says he gets an instruction, more than anything else, saying that just don't speak. Allow things to happen. And he just bears a witness of a miraculous, acquittal from the trial. At that point in time, the Adesha that comes to him is that he is negotiating with Shri Aurobindo for freedom struggle, saying that when would India be free? And the Adesha that is given to him is that India would inevitably be free. And not so coincidentally, it becomes free on 15th of August, which is his birthday, on 1947. Though we have our own take on what that freedom constitutes, whether it is political, or that's all a different discourse. But here I'm talking from a yogic experience point of view. And he is told that while India's freedom and its national development is taken care of, its destiny is taken care of, you have a yogic work to be done for the humanity at large.
So this was for the entire...
the entire humanity at large. And the yoga is for the human transformation. And so you will have to take up a yoga in this direction. So this is broadly the thing. And then he comes to Pondicherry, away from the British colony.
So, the spiritual transformation and the response that he provided, so far we've covered his times and what he was dealing with. Tradition, science, colonial power, and then his own political urge transforming into a spiritual... So purely in terms of the material aspect, because like you mentioned, he did not start a monastic order. His message seems to be different. His message seems to be that you should, an Indian and Hindu Renaissance should include the material into its fold.
Absolutely.
Could you just explain that to us? Because that is probably a big contrast.
Absolutely. I think what is very essential, at that point in time is that from a spiritual point of view, he was liberating us from two dominant ways of thinking spiritually. The two dominant ways, at least for us, when we read about those times, it looks like these are the two dominant ways of thinking about spirituality at large. One was renunciation and asceticism, and sannyasa and moksha and that approach. Very much imbibed from some sort of, one can say, superficial understanding of Vedanta, And another one was, especially in Bengal, heavy bhakti sentimentalism. So,
two very powerful strands.
in their own way. So he managed to articulate clearly that these both are not his goals. But neither he disposed them of anywhere. He made it an absolutely, when he says he has synthesized an integral yoga, it is incomplete without bhakti. It is incomplete without Vedanta is the source of his inspiration. So he had to reinterpret it from the Bhagavad Gita's perspective as how he has understood Vedanta from a perspective of enlightened action. So he gets that to the table from the spiritual discourse point of view. And then he brings bhakti element for a very interesting aspect of cultivating connection with the higher force, how bhakti is inevitable, and how especially a notion of ahetuki bhakti, where there is a sense of surrender and devotion to the higher force without transactional nature. I please grant me this, and therefore I am worshipping you, this kind of a transactional nature. So he urges people, urges his followers to adapt that form of bhakti. So these two flavors, he kind of, puts or mitigates their impact in his spiritual vision. And by virtue, he knows that if it's a monastic order, then obviously the thrust will be on, giving up. You cannot be a sannyasi and getting too engrossed into goals which are very societal, political in nature, and the order or the ashrama dharma itself does not encourage that as much. Having said that, we have always had a firebrand of sannyasis who have always guided our chitta, our own forces. That is a different aspect, but largely speaking, the orientation. So he brought in an aspect of Advaita. Advaita is the darshana which, or the philosophical view, which he brings in. Vedanta is the darshana and Advaita is the philosophical view he brings into the picture. And what he brought in positively is seeking for Shakti. He says, at this point in time, what India needs is more Shakti, Shakti and more Shakti. And
Bharat is Shakti.
Bharat is Shakti, and we need more Shakti. And he uses word strength for Shakti, which is we need to be strong. And we have bhakti, we have higher philosophy and all of that, but we do not have Shakti to make impact onto the minds of collective, of a nation which is currently under a severe sway of inertia. So we need Shakti to waken, we need Shakti to act, we need Shakti to make change. So he's asking for Shakti. So how does he bring that into the scheme of his integral yoga then becomes extremely important. And in this regard, Mother's arrival beside him as a collaborator also becomes absolutely essential. And this is something that our traditional schools and everybody finds it difficult to accommodate, because this is something that doesn't directly fit into the scheme of things, that how things are being in general.
So, think two questions or two dimensions that open up from here. One is the way that he is representing Shakti has occult connotations. He's talking about a very specific kind of force for which you need to build resilience, you need to build greater strength against.
Correct.
So that is one dimension that I think will be very interesting to explore. The other one is, while doing all of these aspects, while he is be the main articulator for all of these dimensions, there's also a great emphasis on aesthetics, on beauty. So this binary of material and spiritual, not just breaking that binary, but also situating that in the beautiful. So he seems to have achieved this entire synthesis in his work. Would that be because whatever you see, even in the in the current contemporary execution of the school, you still see a lot of emphasis on aesthetics.
Absolutely.
Beauty is very, very high, along with the spiritual, the mystical, the material, and all of that.
He's a poet.
He's a poet.
So he's a kavi at the end of the day as well, and he has written phenomenal works, be it prose or poetry. So therefore,
the aspect of beauty is
kind of a default setting. But we will explore that a little bit, because the way he integrates Shakti into the aesthetic is a very beautiful aspect. But coming to the materiality and the the forces of the Shakti that you're talking about, the occult forces, this is a very important aspect. We have been for centuries, especially during the turn of the 20th century, a hush-hush society when it comes to the valiance with which we have explored the spiritual lens and depths. Right? We have Tantra, we have an entire the sciences and the Shastra basis
Yeah.
of exploring the forces. Our whole scheme of looking at the world as the manifest cosmos is that Atala, Vitala, Rasatala, Patala, Talatala, so these are so many worlds. And then you have the Bhur, Bhuva, Subaha, and Tapaha, Mano, Tapoloka, Januloka, Mahaloka. And in those scheme of things, the human just fits into the Bhautika, such as, where the play, so-called terrestrial play is taking place. This is an extremely essential worldview for classical Hindu thought, classical religions. If you were to say that, even, I don't know, I want to use the word pagan religions or anything, cutting across the cultures and pre-Abrahamic period, this was, even from the tribal sense, it is an instinctive sense that there are positive forces which are trying to help and there are negative forces which are trying to harm. It is a simple way. There is no big... it gets only problematic if you emphasize on adamant empiricism and rationality, right? Which is anyways not beneficial for the people who pursue this path. This is even counterproductive to get in that way. And we should not waste our energy into discussing that. So when this is the scheme of things, just imagine a human is in the Bhautika world. And human's destiny is the question of agency, free will and all that becomes kind of laughable because the amount of preconditioning that comes, with us, and also these forces that shape our circumstances. And they have their own imprints in our, locality, wherever we locate ourselves. Ours is a civilization which saw the impression of Shakti in a flower. When we see a joba or a red hibiscus, and when we see its petal, and we see it is worthwhile for offering for Ma Kali's Upasana, because the petal looks like her open tongue. Exactly. Right? When we see Aparajita flower, we see an impression as an offering to the Shakti, because it represents the Mahayoni in its own way. So we make an offering, that way. So this is a culture and a civilization which saw, the impression of the forces, including even in sesame seeds, which we use as part of our rituals. Why do we use it for the Pitra? And why do we use it for certain battling the, negative forces in a way? Everywhere there is imprint of Shakti. Imprint of Shakti. And by virtue of its philosophy, Tantra is the school which has predominantly explored. Predominantly the Vastu Shastra, all of that. And here are the adepts. So to say, by the way, even the yogic schools and the the Siddha schools also, after you cross a certain threshold of energy, you become sensitive to this. What you are being surrounded by, inside and outside. One of the biggest things to think that we are also inside free, as though we have our own agency. Our thoughts are ours, so much so that, we just enter into, I am such a so-called dharmic oriented person. I enter JNU campus tomorrow. After 1 week, I might come out saying that, Marx was a great person, right? Knowing this. So this is the level that
Prakriti matters.
Prakriti matters and how it can enter you, invade you, break your barriers and shape your thought.
And use your own intellect to rationalize this degeneracy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the easiest way,
That is it.
most optimal way, even for adverse forces to act. So when this is the level of thing, but during the turn of century, it was hush-hush. Either bhakti sentimentalism, or say all Brahman, or by any chance you show a deity, you say this deity is nothing but representation of Brahman. And the polytheistic vibrancy which is there, it is so funny that we keep saying that all is Brahman and all deities are Brahman, and we have countless temples and we keep doing our rituals, to Bhairava here, Ganapati here, Ma Durga there, and this goes on. Because honestly, those people who simply have faith and practice, they don't have the burden of intellectual
exploration or explanation.
sanitization, or I would say
Sterilization in some.
absolutely. So that is the best way for us to live. So he brought in this aspect, especially to bring in these dimensions into the scheme of Vedanta, into the scheme of yoga, into the scheme of discussion of Bhagavad Gita. It was unheard.
So that integral yoga is basically a grand synthesis.
Yeah. It is obviously a synthesis of all of this,
Yeah.
but it is actually, when you say integral and Purna,
Yeah.
there are many syntheses that are happening. One is Gnana Marga, Bhakti Marga, Karma Marga synthesis happens. Then there is a synthesis of the integrality of looking at the whole of human composition, right from your materiality to the vitality to the pranic level. So that is Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha in another way, and also in his own planes of existence to the mind, higher mind, intuitive mind, over mind, and super mind and supramental and way beyond. And how do you align it with Sachitananda? And this aspect of integrality is there. The integrality of the avasthas, that is the Swapna Jagrat, Shushupta Turiya avasthas. So there is integrality in every possible way that he has conceptualized. So that is integral. And then he brought in these aspects, and coming specifically to your question on adverse forces, so he very clearly recognized that the forces, there are divine forces that can uplift us if we are only receptive to them. For that, you need to do yoga to become an able receptor to these higher forces and become an instrument or nimitta to them. But what is the purpose of being a receptacle to the higher forces? What are they trying to do in the Bhautika world? Is to manifest more beauty, more harmony, more unity, and removal of discord. Because as humans, we always have this philosophical question: all life, is it just this, the samsara of struggle, pain, and this? And this is what it is. Is there no sense of perfection, or perfection is just a utopic value? And therefore, so even if we are pragmatic and we know that, the joy follows by pain and suffering, dualities are always there. That is one way of contemplation. Yet we do not give up the sense of perfection, and we seem to fulfill that in some sort of a freedom. And so this is always there. So he understood that, he called it life divine. When the higher forces, which have the capacity to transform the lower forces and the dualities and dichotomies and polarities that are there in this plane that we experience. And that's the reason, to put it simply, you do Devata Upasana, you might get some advantage of it, and you might get some result. What result you will get? You want car, you will get a car. You want a job, you want to succeed in your profession, you will get that. All this is easy. But when you ask Devata to preside over your life and reside in you as enshrined being, they will not even look at you. There is nothing worthy in our being with a completely polluted and not fragile and contradictory, driven by conflicts. Today you will say this and tomorrow you will say this. So human is a frail twilight of the supernal dawn that the divine is. Right? So therefore they think, therefore somebody does sadhana and prepares the ground and makes themselves as an adhara to receive, and then they become the Siddha Purusha. And these things happen. So when that is the level, we are seeking the divine forces to help us manifest the beauty. But there are forces which are evil. There is no other word to put it. And asuric forces. In Devi Mahatmyam, it is very clearly said, Devi Bhagavati says that she is the both. Just imagine, that's why I love Shakta, view of it. There is nothing to say that, going in a very elaborate way of moksha and saying that no, or something else, this, the ignorance is not part. No.
Nothing is rejected.
So there is Maya, there is Mahamaya, there is Yoga Maya, and it is all under her, control. This is the Shakta way of looking at things. So there are asuric forces which are trying to disintegrate, and what do they want to do? They want to predominate darkness. As simple as that. So we are such fragile instruments trying to struggle between these two. And this battle is eternally playing out in our own lives. That, we have beautiful thoughts and also, ugly actions to follow it up. So these contradictions persist. So he wanted to bring the, life divine. And in the process, even in a simple way, your goal is freedom of India. And he very clearly saw there are adverse forces. They do not want India's Chit Shakti and the Adhyatmika Shakti to be liberated, because then it would mean an onus of transformation for a larger humanity. And that is at least his vision. And so therefore, those forces, now we call them, colonial forces or Eurocentric forces, or forces that are Abrahamic in nature and that they want to assail us, for their own monotheistic beliefs. And they are extremely discomforting for them that we worship so many polytheistic, deities and the whole bunch of things. And this struggle goes on. And it is important to look at. So for that, you need to know who you are, Svayambodha. And for that, you need to know who is the adverse forces and how the adverse forces at an occult level
are getting the
instrumentation and manifestation here. So therefore, you need to have Śatrubodha. And what do you want to manifest is beauty. So you need to have Saudaryabodha, what you are saying. So I think this is where without having the conceptualization and vision for beauty, what are you even fighting for?
Right. So I think Shri Aurobindo represents all three. Svayambodha, Śatrubodha and Saudaryabodha at the highest level.
At a very advanced level. And, coming to that aesthetics point of view, I would sum it up quickly when he envisions Matri Shakti, of the Divine Mother. He primarily brings forth 4 deities and the goddesses into the picture. And that is of Maheshwari, who is presiding, all-knowing, who has a vast vision of things. And, it is under her scrutiny, all Shakti Sanchalana or Chalana is happening, or Spanda is happening, or vibration is happening. And then you have what you want to experience in life is Aishwaryam, prosperity. So you have Mahalakshmi, right? But for Mahalakshmi to manifest, and the idea of prosperity or Bhoga, which is not, unless you are a renunciant, which is a different philosophical way of looking at it, but Bhoga, Kama, Dharmartha Kama Mokshalo, and in the Kama and Bhoga are so intertwined in a way. Dharmically, how do you partake the life at its essence? So the Bhoga becomes extremely important. So the Bhoga of what? You don't want to have the Bhoga and experience and partaking of poverty. You do not want an impoverishment of thought or experience of life. So you want richness, complete bountifulness, complete vibrancy of life. So that is what Mahalakshmi can confer, right? And for that to confer, what is the receptacle? The receptacle has to have the Adhara Shakti to really receive such a high Shakti and prosperity to manifest. This painstaking work of beauty and receptacle is done by Saraswati. Mahasaraswati does this work. But Mahasaraswati does this work if you let her do this work. This is Shri Aurobindo's way, just roughly paraphrasing. If you allow her to do this work, she will take eternity. Because as an aesthetic, lover, as a creator, as an artist, you are never satisfied. You will keep doing. And this ornamentation and forever perfection reflects in our Indian aesthetics very much. The Europeans had a problem. Saying that, this is so ornate. Why are Indian temples so ornate?
It's an excess of creation.
Excess of creation. So Shri Aurobindo says creation is bountiful. It's boundlessness.
It is your poverty.
It's your poverty. And then this is how it is, the sense of this. So even Mother had that. So she really loved that vibrancy in that. And so that is what Mahasaraswati does. But this cannot go on eternally. Things have to manifest. So there has to be a forceful nature of divine Shakti to come and manifest things. And also to overcome the resisting forces. We do not want the divine beauty manifesting. And how to pulverize them. All these resisting forces. That is done by Mahakal. So this, he beautifully puts it. And I advise people to read about this essay. What he has written, The Mother. In which he describes all these 4 forces beautifully, and Mother also gives commentary on that later on. So this is
So, this is again just a small reminder of the magnificence that Shri Aurobindo is. We've covered, it feels like just an opening of so many different horizons at the same time. Political dimension, the mystical dimension, the whole yoga dimension, but the beautiful dimension, and also the occult dimension. There is really nothing that his gaze has missed or not given us. Just one last thing before we wind up for this episode, because this is also a contemporary debate. And I think you briefly alluded to that in one of your previous remarks, that the idea of evolution, and there is, of course, the whole school of scientific thought around it. the debate seems to be, is it purposeless mutation, or is there something divine about it? And Shri Aurobindo had something to say about this as well. If you could clarify that for us.
Absolutely. So this again brings back to the fundamental levels of theories of origination that we have extensively in our own philosophical system.
Cosmology of it.
Yeah. So the way Shri Aurobindo looks at evolution is from spiritual perspective. He makes a clear distinction upfront. Those who are patient and open-minded first will go and read what he said about it. Those who have been lazy have been simply equating it with a Western way of looking at evolution, because evolution as a word doesn't fit into our schema. Anywhere spiritual literature, you will not find anything to do with it. So what do you even mean by evolution or transformation? Because we have either we are talking about moksha, there is a life, birth and death that is going on, and therefore you want to liberate yourself. That has been one traditional way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is going very deep into the questions such as, who am I? And when you ask that, more and more in that investigation and interrogation, as the siddhas of those traditions have proved that so evolution and transformation means that you are acting to perfect something which is imperfect. Or you are moving in a direction of an increased sophistication or complexity. Right? But in this inquiry of who am I, all of this pursuit looks like mirage. You are not. It even further looks like you are chasing the shadow of a mirage. That meaningless it becomes when you have suddenly turned your investigation into who am I, or an Upanishadic statement more in that direction. But is that so? Are there enough philosophical systems within our Indian schema which allow for the other possibilities? And the Tantra does it. Tantra, tantric view of scheme of things very clearly identifies that we are such an helpless state, as a human, and we are pashus more or less. And that is the reason we have these godheads or the deities, with animal as well as the human nature, which is also from the classical religions, across the belt. They are all vanished. We are here, right? So from that point of view, we are a pashu who have to become Veera, having the aspiration and goal to overcome our limitations, so that we eventually become Divya, the divine beings. This is there as a goal, pretty much. And it is widely, accepted in the tantric school of things. And very profound philosophies are there, especially coming from the Trika and Krama Siddhanta from the Kashmir, now popularly known as Kashmir Shaivism. So ascent and descent of the Shiva and Shakti, that is so beautifully explored in so many ways. All this is there. So scope for a greater perfection and manifestation, and being a free individual
agent for that.
Or experiencing that freedom in its own way, or a state of Jivan Mukti, or whatever you might want to call, that is all possible within that. Only thing is, Shri Aurobindo puts it in the context of a collective, because all this I will achieve, okay, fine. But then what about, the world and, so he sees world as nothing but, Brahman and Ishvara in its essence, which is again not his own new way of thinking. If you explore that entire scheme of Satkaryavada, Vivartavada, and all of these, or theories of origination, you would see him aligned to Satkaryavada. Satkaryavada essentially says that the effect is already within the cause. Right? And this comes to Purusha and Prakriti in a way. So as soon as the Prakriti is in communion with Purusha, immediately the balance of the gunas, changes in a way, and then the creation happens. The only thing is there is no sense of purpose, direction, perfection, aspiration in that kind of that's how the world is born from a Satkaryavada point of view. Here, Shri Aurobindo says there is a vision towards perfection. That is a hypothesis. He has put it on the table. And he is willing to develop metaphysics on it, which he did in Life Divine. He is willing to synthesize all the past yogas and provide a yogic philosophy to it in Synthesis of Yoga. He is willing to put it as his own personal journal of his journey by writing it down in Records on Yoga. He is willing to manifest it as an aesthetic creative manifestation in Savitri. He is willing to extrapolate that and try to formulate his views and thoughts on the collective at the current stage of society, politics, and the goals of it in various books and the works that he has written. He has done enormous amount of the Shastric work for the aspirant who is willing to follow this hypothesis that there is a sense and goal for perfection, both collective and individual, provided you are an instrument for the higher powers and open up yourself as a receptacle for that. How do you open up? In the state of avidya, we are such a frail, contradictory, conflicting personalities. Where is the scope of for us, even a speck of divinity in us to collaborate with the divine to make this happen? That he points out in us as the Chaitya Purusha or psychic being. He says, all is not darkness. There is a silent warriors absolutely burning like a steadfast flame with an aspiration towards the divinity in the deep caverns of your heart. So when you come in touch with it, it will divinize, spiritualize all your life, and it has a capacity to make your instrument of mind, body, prana as the instruments for the higher manifestation and be in a complete state of Sharanagati and steadfastness for the higher power. This is the force within us that takes the burden to bridge the gap between a life divine and the life that is seemingly very undivine. So this is the hypothesis he has put there. He has put the whole of metaphysics. He has put the yogic path
and the praxis
for it in integral yoga. He has formulated it and he has opened it up for us. So in that context, evolution is spiritual in nature, just alluding to Satkaryavada. In this, the effect in the cause. So if you were to be told at a point in time when there was not even a manifestation, and you were told that, there will be a manifestation of cosmos that's going to come, assume you are operating with your mind. There is no evidence for you to believe it. Would you believe?
There's no empirical...
There is no sense at all. You would obviously not believe because that is the nature of the mind, that if it does not have a sense of experience and if it does not have a sense of evidence, it will not believe. Then if you were to told, so finally, did it happen? It happened. So there is a manifestation and materiality. So Adara has been built, which looks so undivine. So-called Satchitananda is so full of joy, but here it's all gross. It is completely inert and nothing divinity about it. In that, if I were to tell you, this is all his way of saying that if you were told in that there will be a vibration and pulsation of spanda of life, would you believe? Where is the evidence? There is no scope. So, but did it happen? It happened. Why did it happen? Because it was imminent. Therefore, it happened. And does it seem to be a greater perfection than what was the initial? At least your mind can perceive so and say so. Of course, if you are a Bodha, you can always say your mind is conjuring it. That is a different way. If you are coming from the Mayavada, you can always say these are all these reconciliations he does philosophically in Life Divine. Each and every single strand. And then at that point in time, if you were told there will be a thinking being that will appear in this vibratingly pulsating vital life, of wilderness and beastfulness. And there will be somebody who has the capacity to suddenly think and reflect and cognize about themselves. That would appear, would you believe? He would not. But where did it appear from? It was inherent already. It was latent already. So he takes this side of Satkarya. I'm just saying Satkaryavada. He also mentions it in his own way. He takes the Satkaryavada, but he doesn't make it meaningless. He says that it is the Purushottama,
the will
that is there. So therefore, this perfection is ingrained in us. Seeking for beauty, seeking for perfection, seeking for harmony, seeking for divinity in this manifestation and terrestriality is inevitable for a human. So that is what keeps driving us. So this is what is conceptualized as evolution.
The ramifications of that for the institutions that you create. There is one set of institutions you can create when, your fundamental axiom is that life is beastly, nature is harsh and brutish. Because then you're building only for mistrust.
Absolutely.
And the set of institutions that you create when you think about life as divine.
Absolutely.
And giving as nurturing.
And aspirationally divine.
Aspiration.
Then you become responsible to work towards
it.
Not just a wishy-washy, wishful thinking of life is divine.
And how critical it is when we are talking about, loneliness, meaninglessness as an epidemic.
And suddenly you have a purpose.
And
you have a purpose, and you are the first instrument to work on towards that. And then that just makes it absolutely, you're ready to wake up the next morning.
Yeah. And that is the purpose of our conversation also.
Right.
To try and bring the civilizational discourse into a personal fold of action. Thank you so much for just illuminating these aspects for us. Just grateful.
Thank you for calling me.
Thank you.
Joyma.